Hi and welcome back to the HaPi podcast. One of the big objectives of this podcast is to try and remove some of the barriers of knowledge sharing that can exist from time to time within our industries. I'm going to be speaking to a variety of different people who are in a position to offer those different solutions and are currently doing that. So sit back, relax and enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of HaPi, the HaPi podcast. I am delighted this morning to welcome Kavita Oberoi onto HaPi to have a conversation with me. Kavita and I have been talking over the past few weeks and months, and I am genuinely really pleased to have Kavita on. We're going to have a good conversation about what's going on in pharma, how she partners with pharma. But before we do that, I want to welcome you on, Kavita, and give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and give a little bit of background to who you are, a little bit about your story, and then we can talk about what's going on in the industry and how you've had an impact within our industry and continue to do over the years. So welcome, really pleased to see you. Thank you for coming on. Do you want to give us an intro this morning and let us know a little bit about who Kavita Oberoi is?
Thanks very much, Colin. It's a pleasure to come on. So I think a lot of people say, are entrepreneurs born or can somebody become an entrepreneur? For me, I think both are true. But for me, entrepreneurship was very much in the genes. So my father was an entrepreneur. And he came over to the UK in 1960s. So I was one of 4 children. I had an older brother and a sister who were actually born in India. And myself and my younger brother were born in England. So my father used to work as a very low-paid job in India on the railway station. But he always had big ambitions. And, when he set his mindset to come to England, it was about not just coming to work here, he was going to create a business. So my entrepreneurial, I suppose, skills or drive comes from my father. So what he did is he obviously didn't have enough money to get here. He sold my mother's jewellery and he got himself a ticket and he came over to England. And he started off in Bradford. And what he had is, he was very charismatic. Business is all about people. If you like someone, you are going to do business with them. And it starts with people. He was an amazing people person. So he watched somebody plumb a bath, and he wasn't a plumber. He had no idea about plumbing. And when he saw that person plumbing a bath, he thought, I'm going to set a plumbing business. But my father was never, ever going to get his hands dirty. So what he did is he called over his brother from India, who was going to do the donkey work, and he was going to be the mastermind. And I do hear stories of, they literally were Laurel and Hardy, made a few mess ups and things in jobs because they weren't skilled plumbers or professionals. But people loved them as people, and they got through. And through that, then he set up a plumbing business, a retail outlet. And that business is now 3rd generation. And there's not many businesses that stand that test of time. So when I came along, so he then got enough money to get my mum over and bring the 2 children. And at that time, we had a retail outlet, and I was actually born above this corner plumbing shop. And he said, when I came along, I was a lucky charm, and that's when his wealth really came in. And my business lessons started so very early. And what used to happen, I have all these memories of my mum used to put me in a new dress every day, give me my bottle, and I would be out with my father on his business trips. And I've got pictures, and he was one of the first men who'd bought like a Mercedes. All the Asians would always have Mercedes, so he bought this, and I've got a picture of me sitting right on the front of the bonnet in my little dress. And when he used to go round, you'd never do this now. He used to leave me in the car for hours, going to these meetings, and I was just left there. Can you imagine that now?
Thank goodness. Wow.
But that's sort of where my business lessons really started, I think. Those very early days at the age of 2. And then I used to go down into that shop, and I used to loved selling, and I could do the easy bits like, the copper sockets, the 15 mil, and the elbows. Anything too complex was sort of get beyond me. And used to have a typewriter in there, and I absolutely used to drive him insane with that typewriter. Used to break it a lot. I think that's where my lessons started. But, it was a real conflict, because even though I was sort of doing that, in the background, in our family, men went to work, women stayed at home, looked at the family, were the family makers. So there was always this conflict going on. But for me, I always wanted to break all those barriers. I was a rebel, be the rebellious one. So that's a little bit about my background and how it all started.
So, I mean, I've heard a little bit of this before in other things that I've watched you on, other interviews and other podcasts. And so I've heard this, and I wanted you to share that, because I think it's really, really important. I do believe that everybody has a story. And when I had heard yours, I thought people need to hear that. People need to listen or listen certainly and learn from that. One of the words that kind of came to my mind there when you were talking about it was mentor. But we haven't really necessarily put that as part of our agenda today. But just as you were talking there just now, I think so many of the good and successful entrepreneurs have had brilliant mentors, in their life and in their career. And from from what you're saying, you can have had a better and a closer mentor, really, and very simple lessons. Just watch what I do. I think sometimes we overcomplicate it. Would you agree? We overcomplicate it sometimes. Just watch what I do. I'm doing okay, so just watch what I do. Copy that and put your own style to it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's so important, if you want to fast track your career or learn, learning takes place in many forms. And obviously, when I was younger, you were watching what was happening, the till, the sums, the money exchange, all of that. And my mentors are my parents. I've got the most amazing mother who helped me to break those barriers and gave me that empowerment. And I remember, when it came time for marriage, one of the key skills I needed to be able to do was cook. Mum said, if you can't cook, you're not going to get a husband. Up until that time, I don't think I really went into the kitchen. I was really focused on what I was doing. But, my mother was the most amazing cook. And, things be going around you. So, the principles and you learn in many forms. So, it's important to have mentors, lifelong learning, put yourself in situations where you have that opportunity to learn. But yeah, mentors are really important. Yeah,
really key. I mean, I've not had the same journey as you, but certainly when I came into medical sales long time ago, my dad took me around a lot of the surgeries that he went round as a rep and introduced me. Now, we weren't in the same company, we weren't competing against each other in terms of what we're selling, but he just said, right, come on, I'll take you around, and I'll introduce you to some of the doctors, and just watch what I do. There's some of the tricks of the trade that I probably wouldn't have picked up from my dad moving on, but that was maybe a generation thing from his time in terms of how they sold at that time. Things have changed, things have evolved, things have moved on, but there's still a lot of those lessons that I use today, in terms of how I speak to people, how I deal with people, and I'm sure you're very much exactly the same. So great, thank you for that intro. So
I was just going to say, Colin, then as well, with mentors as well, what they can do is perhaps make you think a little bit differently, push you on. So you may not think you're ready for an opportunity, but, make you think about, you should go for the next step. When I went for my interview for my next step, perhaps, because I was doing so well, I was at top of my field, doing top salesperson, doing the medical sales role. I might not have, quite thought about it. And then, somebody in the workplace who was my trainer said, I think you should. Why not? Why not? And then you sort of start thinking. So, that's why it's important to have the right people around you who can, help you to progress on with your career.
And not just say the things you want to hear. Say the things that that are going to maybe be a little bit prickly and push you out of those comfort zones and make you think differently and try things. They won't all work. But you're right. The best mentors are the ones that say, have you thought about this? Try this, and maybe a little bit unsure about doing it. So yeah, absolutely key. So you moved on, and you've touched on it there. You went into medical sales, and you worked with Bayer for a while. So just talk us through a little bit about what that was, and then moving on to to where you are just now. We're going to talk a little bit about what you do now and how you partner with different companies now.
So Colin, I got to understand when we were first chatting that actually I knew your dad, because we were both at Bayer. But I was straight out of uni, and all those years ago, wow, what an exciting job when you go to your initial training course and then you walk away with your company car and everything. I mean, those really were those amazing good old days. So I came out of uni. Now, for me, when I managed to go to uni, I had to go back and forth every day because, it wasn't about, girls were not supposed to be educated, etc. And I had a pact with my mum. My father had already passed away at that time. And, there was a real taboo. I was the first girl in our family, extended family, who was allowed to sort of do what they were doing and go to uni. But I had to go back and forth every day. And when I was at uni, I did chemistry. And when I did a project which was in the labs for my final year degree. And I remember that I thought, when I come out, I do not want to be in a lab. What I want to do, because I wanted to be a doctor, but I wasn't allowed to study for a doctor, because the rationale was, if I studied to be a doctor, I'd be too old when I finished and nobody would marry me. So I had to go for a different career. So I thought, what did I really want? I want to be in front of doctors and I want to be in sales. And then I looked up a career path, and that's when I came across medical sales. So I ended up getting a first class in chemistry, and that's when I got into Bayer. And at the time, it was through Innovex. It was like a temporary sales force. They were launching a new drug.
That's where I was as well. Yeah.
So, and I started in Bradford, and I did know a lot of the GPs, and it was just like it was the perfect job. I love meeting people, and the sales was just climbing. It was magic. I loved it.
Good. So now, as you've moved on, we've both been part of the pharma industry, directly and indirectly, for a long time now, and we both value, well, I certainly do, and I know you do, certainly the impact that the pharma industry has had, on a number of different areas. We've seen it, more so recently over the past couple of years with the vaccination for COVID. It's become more prominent. Pharma's become more prominent because of that, and thankfully in a positive way. So now you're working alongside pharma companies and different healthcare companies, partnering with them. What is it that you are doing with these companies from Oberoi Consulting perspective?
Okay, so our passion really is about improving patient outcomes. Okay, so my father, he died prematurely from a heart attack, and if I think about when I started and why I started, it was experience that I had with Bayer, the gaps that we were looking at. I was selling a statin at the time, what the guidelines said about patients, their risk factors had to be managed, etc. And, years ago, we wouldn't be looking proactively at patients in that way. There was no systematic review of patients and looking at the gaps and optimizing their treatment. So my journey all started with, really that National Service Framework came out for CHD, and it talked about, patients who should be optimized with a statin. So, that was all those years ago. And now what we do is we have national teams, and we look and we help. Either we've just won a contract with NHS England in different therapeutic areas. We're looking to identify those gaps where patients can be optimized. And the last few years, we've also added clinical teams to help support that transition, and education to upskill the clinicians so that these patients aren't missed, because, it's all about prevention. And I suppose it all goes back to all those years ago, that experience that I had. I was selling a statin. I understood what the need was. And I also found that, when I was seeing my GPs, I talked to them about, these are the patients that need to be on a statin. This is the guidelines. And we'd go through that. And I said, right, when somebody comes in the next time, would you prescribe, treat these patients? Yes, yes. And I found myself got really frustrated because I'd go back in and nothing had changed. So I loved computers, absolutely loved computers. That's what my final year degree, I built a computer simulated hydrogenation experiment in BBC Basic.
Wow.
I had no idea how I did that, but I got given the BBC Basic, the computer.
Yeah.
So I learned some basic coding on there. And anyway, the uni actually sold it afterwards. So I loved computers. And then I thought, you know what? How could I really escalate my sales? Because these doctors are saying that if they knew who these patients were, if I could help them find the patients, they would prescribe and treat these patients and therefore prevent an event. And in those days, it's crazy. I'd say to my doctors, can I help you find these patients? And they said, yeah, go away. Here's my computer. Go and find. And I self-taught myself a clinical systems. You would never, ever do this now. And I'd produce a list, and literally that's what they would do. Go, oh, how did you do that? It's so magic. To me, it was so obvious. And for them, they thought, wow, that's amazing. And then after that, the QOF framework came along. So that's, how that opportunity came along, driven by a passion to sort of help improve patient outcomes. So that is what we do. We sort of take all these numbers and all these things that are in a database and make them meaningful in terms of patients and the impact optimizing those patients' care could have, because we have the evidence base of different therapies and the difference it can make.
Yeah. That goes on really nicely to actually what we've been looking at in this series and talking to a number of our guys about has been innovation within pharma, or innovation within healthcare as a whole, and seeing people who are on the receiving end of having innovative ideas presented to them. And also what you've just demonstrated there is an innovative idea that has worked, that has benefited the end user, being the patient ultimately, but has also benefited the customer, if you want to say, within the GP. So how important, let me ask you a question with regards to innovation then, in terms of, because I think this is really key and something that I would regard you as being a bit of an expert in, is how important do you see innovation and continuing within pharma and partnering within pharma? Do you value, or do you believe that's such a key thing to continue evolving, having innovative ideas to present and to work with NHS and pharma companies?
Gosh, absolutely. I mean, without innovation, none of us would have survived the pandemic, whenever you get a challenge that makes you think harder and differently. It sped up some of the thinking around, so many businesses, so many industries and pharma. And, if I think about what we're doing now, the concept is there, but how we deliver it has changed so much.
Yeah.
And you know what, we are constantly, personally, I'm a perfectionist, so I'll sort of break it again, and then we start again and we make it better and better. And you have to, because it's so competitive. But you have to move with the times and the innovation and the needs of the market. So, so much more digital is there now, is how we, we are really focused on population health, because the NHS structure is different. It's not just about auditing one practice, about that whole area, the whole primary care network or the integrated care board. It's all about population health to make a difference en masse. So, and I think what I find is really great when we're working with our pharma clients who are absolute partners. And sometimes you're sitting there and you together, you're really talking about so far and what the next step is. And together you drive innovation. And that's really our philosophy, because we work together as real partners. It's really exciting, actually, really exciting in terms of what we end up developing as a result of that. And it never looks the same as when we first started.
Do you think it can ever really be limited in some ways with innovation? What do I mean by that? I think in terms of we're getting to a point where there's always ideas coming out all the time in terms of how we can deliver that message or how we deliver that message. when we deliver that message. Do you think there's ever a limitation to that, or do you think that's limitless in some ways in terms of innovation, because we've got so many brilliant minds within our industry that come up with what about this, what about this, what about this?
Absolutely. I think it's important to have a diverse set of heads working together, because people bring different perspectives. I think it is limitless, but don't do it for the sake of it. Think about the purpose and the end point, and what difference is that going to make? So if you adapt it, what's the end impact? So I think don't change for the sake of it. But I think, often it's those challenges. And if any business idea, any business is born through fixing a challenge or a gap, So, think about those customers, or the end customers being the healthcare professionals. And what requirements and needs are there, and then sort of work backwards. And I think, it's really important when you are sort of delivering, for us, it's all about service deliveries, getting that feedback, evaluation, how can you make that better? So I think, end user feedback is really important when you start developing services, is, what we do.
You and I think, are quite similar in the fact that the businesses that we work in on a daily basis, they're all about providing a solution to the end user. So on a daily basis within Evolve, a client will come to us with a problem or a challenge, which has been they can't fill that vacancy. And we come up with a solution, and we try and get it across to our team that exhaust absolutely everything that you possibly can with that client. And it'd be the same within the NHS. I think the NHS, even more so now, when we're hearing it all the time, they're under so much pressure. They have problems, they have challenges, whether that be staffing, whether that be not enough beds, and all the issues that are going on just now. They at some point they will come to you at Oberoi Consulting, or come to us at Evolve. And I think it's so important that we exhaust everything and show them that we're exhausting every possible angle to help people, particularly NHS.
Particularly, absolutely. Absolutely. And just, working alongside them, so that you're showing, you're taking that feedback on board and adapting as you're going through that journey for the benefit of, the end service that we develop.
Yeah. So that's something that we have undoubtedly seen over the past 8 or 9 months of this year, where clients have come to us and have had a real need, and we try to develop solutions. And that's where you then move on and you build these partnerships, because you build trust, because they can see that you are trying to help them and you're trying to work with them, and provide a solution to them that will work for everybody. Let me kind of move on to our kind of final part I wanted to talk about today. And I think this is something we always try and offer some advice to people who are watching this. And people who are watching this will be at completely different levels of career. There'll be people who are watching this who are graduates. There'll be people who are watching this who are a little bit more advanced in their career. But what would you say to somebody just now, Kavita, who is looking to progress or looking to move on in a career, either within our space of pharma healthcare, or perhaps considering going into something on their own as an entrepreneur? What kind of advice would you give these people just now?
Well, I think the first step is, to really sort of think about that vision. For me, for my next step, it's always been, you've got to have that vision and dream and aspiration. You've got to have that to start with. You've got to want to do that. And that sometimes comes around the people that you associate with, etc. And you've got to feel the fear and do it anyway. There is always a fear. And I think then it's about making sure, and pharma are brilliant, really. They're supportive, help you put your development plan in place, good at spotting talent, helping you to fast track. But, it's got to be driven by you. And I think it's really important, you do sort of say, this is what I want to do, and look at the different opportunities, because you might not know what those roles are available. If there's a common opportunity, to take those opportunities. But I think it's making sure as well you have wide experience at different things, because you don't know what might be the one that you think, wow, this is absolutely my dream role or job. And I think it's important as well is, there's lots of competitions available as well in pharma, etc. If your company comes on board, to get yourself part of that. It's a good process, and it's good for your career progression.
Yeah.
And a bit of self-motivation, and I suppose, get over that doubt, because I think sometimes when people are starting out, some people have those doubts about themselves. But I think it's really keeping that focus. If that's something that is the role you want to go in, you need to keep that focus and look at and get feedback as to why you might not be ready for that yet, and what is it that you need to do. So understanding that, and be open to feedback.
Yeah, surround yourself with good people. As you say, don't be worried about critical feedback. I was speaking to somebody recently, and I passed on a compliment to them, and in some ways they didn't really know how to take that compliment. It was just to say, well done. And they actually said, I prefer getting not negative feedback, but constructive feedback, because then you've got something to talk about. And I could understand that. And I just said, well, when you get nice feedback, just say thank you, that's very kind. And when you get, constructive feedback, or sometimes you maybe perceive it as negative feedback, just say, right, okay, what can we do to change that? What can I do to make me better at that, to improve my sales, to improve my delivery, to improve whatever it is? But I think that's been a key strand of our conversation today, Kavita, is surrounding yourself with good people. You've done that, certainly from a baby right through to where you are now. And I'd like to think that people watching this or listening to this will take that on board. And when we say good people, not just good people who say things to make you feel better every day, but good people who will push your boundaries and who will really kind of move you on. So thank you. I've covered everything that I want to cover with you today. I'm genuinely really delighted to have you on. And if there's anything that people can take from today, please share it, enjoy it, learn from it. And Kavita, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin.